Now, commentator and author Rob Henderson joins me now to discuss his new book, Troubled, a memoir of foster care, family and social class. Lovely to see you this morning, Rob. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning, Camilla.
It's a fascinating book, this, because, I mean, your life story so far has been extraordinary, really. You go from foster care to foster care, you living in desperate poverty, really, a huge amount of adversity you have to overcome. And yet, regardless of all of the challenges that life throws at you, you end up at Yale University in the US. Mm-hmm. How on earth did that happen? What do you put it down to?
There were a variety of different factors, but one was, I got out of the milieu I was in as soon as I could and enlisted in the U.S. Air Force when I was 17. So as soon as I graduated high school, I had to have my adoptive mother sign a permission slip because I was still underage. She'd allowed me to go off to the Air Force, and then from there I turned my life around and managed to get into Yale of all places, and then obtained a PhD at Cambridge. And there were a variety of different forces, but that was really the key, that decision to put myself in an environment where I could learn discipline and motivation and leadership and all of those things.
I mean, lots of people often look to the military, and people sometimes say, bring back national service. It might be a way of kind of getting Gen Z, back into the spirit of working for a living and trying hard and being aspirational. I mean, do you agree with that? The military's not for everyone, I guess.
I mean, I think the national service might work in certain contexts, like in Israel or South Korea, when there are serious national security threats. In the U.S. context or the U.K. context, I'm not entirely convinced, simply because these, completely different geopolitically in terms of defense. It doesn't have to be the military. I am thinking that, beyond the military, there could be other forms of national service, the Peace Corps, something along those lines of, just trying to inspire young people to broaden their horizons and learn some life skills and sort of help them bridge that transition into adulthood. There may be something there. It doesn't necessarily have to be the military.
Was there a sense, though, and I'm always intrigued by this when I hear about people's really challenging sort of life stories, that Rob Henderson, Rob as an individual, was always going to triumph, that you had something in you that meant that you were going to seize the very few opportunities that you were given? I mean, is this a case of sort of personality? Is it a case of circumstance? What do you put it down to?
I mean, both of those things are always a factor, sort of your innate intrinsic characteristics and the forces around you and external, context. But a lot of it, those two things are important. There's an element of luck as well. I was behaving, extremely recklessly. In the book, I write about my teenage years. I was doing drugs. I was drinking and driving a lot. I was getting into fights, vandalizing buildings, kind of the things that wayward young kids do when they don't have a lot of supervision or oversight and live in fatherless homes and so on. But I think that part of it was just a bit of self-reflection, a little bit of mentorship from some of the teachers and people around me. That helped. And that was one reason why I actually joined the military. Actually, there was a male teacher who suggested it, and then one of my friend's fathers. So in the book, I write about how I actually moved out of my adoptive parents' house when I was 16, moved in with my friend and his brother and his father for reasons I explain. And his father had also been in the Air Force. And so, there were these sort of male older figures in my life. And I think having some mentorship and some sort of, people who can guide your life decisions, that can help as well.
Well, can we talk about kind of father figures? Because these days it's difficult to sort of talk about this issue, the issue of fatherlessness, without being criticised, without people saying, oh, you're just trying to stigmatise single-parent families. But at the same time, it shines throughout this book that if you didn't have these male role models along the way, you might not be where you are today.
Yeah, I think it's a real shame that we can't speak about this issue, simply because, the issue around fatherless homes is primarily concentrated, not entirely, but mostly concentrated in low-income communities, places where there's a lot of sort of disrepair and poverty. And look, one of the number one predictors of social mobility in the U.S. and the U.K. is coming from a two-parent family. The only really sort of bright spot in my early life was, funny enough, it wasn't having a father in the home. It was just having two parents. I explain in the book, my adoptive mother was temporarily in a relationship with a woman, and they were together and they were committed to one another, and they helped to raise me and my adoptive sister. And that was really important for me. And there were these kind of male role models around, and it's important, I think, even though I didn't have a father, I mentioned, these other people in my life that really did help to sort of contribute and, sort of tweak some of my intuitions about what a good life should be.
Can you tell me about you coining the phrase luxury beliefs? Because I think it's really interesting, this idea that, say, your average university educated, I don't know, Just Stop Oil protester obviously lives this life of luxury, but is calling for policies that actually make the poor poorer. Just tell us about how you came up with that phrase and what it really means.
Well, so luxury beliefs are ideas and opinions that confer status on the upper class while inflicting costs on the lower classes. And a core feature of a luxury belief is that the believer is sheltered from the consequences of his or her belief. And this idea came to me when I arrived at Yale as an undergraduate. So I was 25 years old by this point. You know, I'd spent my early life in foster homes and different kinds of family arrangements, left for the military, and then set foot on campus in this sort of rarefied elite university as a slightly older person compared to a lot of my peers. And I would just listen to the students, the undergrads, grad students, professors, administrators, people who had graduated from these kinds of universities. I worked at Stanford, and I was just sort of spent the last few years sort of immersed in the elite university environment. And I would hear these newfangled beliefs about, defunding the police, or denigrating the importance of family, or promoting addictive technologies, and often at the expense of people who were sort of lower down the socioeconomic ladder. I mean, the defund the police one is a very easy way to understand this. But yeah, the Just Stop Oil, or blocking traffic for people who are on their way to their 9-to-5 jobs. They can't clock into work. I
mean, you make the point about defunding the police. I mean, that's all well and good if you're saying that as a Yale student who probably doesn't encounter much crime at all in their lives. Yeah. But if you're in a lower socioeconomic group and you're constantly having your house broken into, or drug dealers out on the street outside, the idea of defunding the police is actually really unpopular.
Yeah, well, you can see this. I mean, I cite statistics in the book. There were representative survey data collected in the U.S., and when you break down the results by income group, the highest income Americans were the most supportive of defund the police. College-educated people were more likely to support defunding the police than less educated people. And as a result, violent crime spiked, homicide rates increased, and those victims were primarily people who were poor, marginalized, dispossessed from these communities. And there's never been sort of a reconciliation, an apology, and we've just sort of moved on and attempted to pretend like that actually never happened.
And also you've got a theory around the phrase white privilege, or at least its widespread use in campuses.
Well, I find that oftentimes the people who are the most enthusiastic about the white privilege idea, or who like to talk about their own privilege, are sort of white, upper middle class college graduates of elite universities. And, it's interesting because ostensibly it's about them expressing, feelings of guilt or remorse. But oftentimes what happens is they sort of elevate their own status in the eyes of their peers, because then the people around them, other elite university graduates, say, oh, yes, this person gets it. This person understands that they have all this privilege. And then they end up elevating their reputation and their esteem in the eyes of others. But when white privilege policies are implemented, it's not going to be elite university graduates that are harmed. It's going to be working class white people, poor white people who are attempting to achieve a bit of success in their own lives and achieve some upward mobility. They're the ones who are going to be blocked by policies, attempting to inhibit this bizarre idea of white privilege. Well, it's all in this new book, Troubled, a memoir of foster care, family and social class. Rob, it's a great, great book, and we do recommend people to have a read because it challenges some of the, I would say, virtual signalling that we've witnessed in the past 10 years. Thank you very much for coming in this morning. Lovely to see you.